The station was dying. Cold lights flickered across cracked walls and the air stank of burned wires and old blood. The hallways were silent now, except for the faint hiss of leaking steam and the echo of the human captain's boots as he walked through the ruins. He had come for scrap. Old circuits, broken fuel cells, anything to keep his ship alive a little longer. But then he saw her. She was lying on the floor in the shadow of a collapsed support beam, half covered in dust. Her armor was shattered, split open at the chest, scorched black around the edges. Dried green blood streaked her arms. One leg was bent wrong and a sharp piece of metal had torn through her shoulder. She was barely breathing. Her long silver hair clung to her face, matted and dirty. Her eyes were half open, unfocused, glowing faintly like dying stars. There was nothing left in them but exhaustion. The human froze. He had seen wounded soldiers before, but never someone who looked this lost. He stepped closer slowly, careful not to startle her. Her eyes flickered. And she moved, not fast, not strong, just enough to drag herself a few inches away from him, scraping across the floor with a broken arm. "Stop," he said gently. She hissed, a weak sound, and tried to crawl further. Her body trembled like it might break apart. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. She didn't answer. Her gaze darted around like a trapped animal's, wild and desperate. He could see it in her eyes. She expected cruelty. She expected pain. She expected to be finished off. The captain slowly crouched, setting down his blaster. He raised both hands to show they were empty. "You're hurt," he said. "Let me help." She stared at him with hollow eyes. For a long moment, nothing moved. The station creaked quietly around them, metal settling like old bones. Then she collapsed. Her head hit the cold floor with a soft thud. Her body went limp, her faint glow dimming almost to nothing. The captain didn't hesitate. He slid his arms under her broken body. She was far lighter than she looked and lifted her from the floor. Her skin was cold through the torn armor. Her breath was shallow, almost not there at all. "You held on this long," he muttered softly. "Don't quit now." He carried her through the ruined corridors, boots echoing in the silence. Once her eyes half opened. She looked up at him in confusion, lips parting like she might speak, but no sound came. Her gaze blurred again, and she slipped back into darkness. At the docking bay, his ship waited, small, battered, its paint scorched from too many fights. The ramp opened with a hiss of steam. The crew gasped when they saw her. "Who is that?" whispered Jax, the mechanic. "Found her on the lower decks," the captain said. His voice was calm, steady. "She's bleeding. She's one of them," Tali hissed. "The war clans. They kill anything human." "Not tonight," the captain said simply. He carried her to the med bay and laid her on the narrow cot. The overhead light painted her wounds in sharp shadow. Pieces of her broken armor clattered to the floor. Underneath, her skin was marked with deep burns and old scars. Her ribs showed through pale flesh. She looked less like a warrior and more like something abandoned. The captain washed the blood from her shoulder and sealed the gash with a med gel patch. He wrapped her broken leg, fixed her breathing mask, and started a slow drip of warm fluids. The crew hovered in the doorway, whispering. "She's dangerous," Tali said. "She's dying," the captain replied. Hours passed. The engines hummed as the ship left the dead station behind. She didn't wake. She didn't move. The captain sat by her bed, arms crossed, watching the slow blink of the heart monitor. He had no reason to do this. She was a stranger, maybe even an enemy. But he couldn't walk away. Something about the way she had crawled, still fighting even with nothing left, would not leave his mind. Sometime in the quiet hours, she stirred, her eyelids fluttered. She blinked slowly, staring at the ceiling. Her lips parted, voice cracked and low. "Why, didn't you kill me?" The captain leaned forward. "Because you're not dead yet." Her eyes moved to him just for a second. Then she turned her face away, silent. He didn't ask anything more. He only stood, adjusted her blanket, and said gently, "Rest." As the ship glided through the dark, she lay still on the bed, her breath shallow but steady. She was wounded. She was shamed. She was completely alone, but for the first time, she was not abandoned. The ship floated through the cold black between stars, its engines humming like a distant heartbeat. Inside, everything was quiet, except for the faint rhythm of the alien woman's breathing. She had been unconscious for 2 full days. The med gel had closed her wounds. The fluids had warmed her blood, but her eyes stayed shut. The crew moved carefully around the med bay, whispering like the air itself might break her. The captain stayed by her side. He sat in the same chair every shift, boots planted, arms crossed, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. He didn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He just stayed. On the 3rd day, she woke. Her eyes blinked open slowly, glowing faint gold in the dim light. She stared at the ceiling first, then at the unfamiliar walls, then at him. The captain stood. "You're safe," he said quietly. Her gaze darted like a cornered animal's. She tried to sit up fast, but pain shot through her leg. She gasped, teeth bared, and collapsed back onto the cot. "Easy," he said. "You're injured." She turned her face away, silent. Her jaw tightened like she was swallowing words she would never speak. That evening, he left a plate of warm food by her bed. She didn't touch it. The next morning, he left water and soft bread. She ignored it. By nightfall, she finally drank half the water when she thought he wasn't watching. The captain said nothing. He only refilled it when she slept. On the 4th day, she stood, slowly, stiffly, using the wall for balance. Her wounded leg trembled under her weight, but she refused to fall. She walked 3 steps, stopped, then turned her back to him and stared at the far wall like it was safer than any face. The captain leaned in the doorway, arms folded. "There's an empty room across the hall," he said. "You can stay there," she didn't answer. But she limped out of the med bay, silent as drifting snow, and disappeared into the small cabin. She made it hers quickly, not with decoration but with silence. She kept the lights dim, the door half shut. She sat cross-legged on the floor for hours, staring at nothing, eyes hollow and distant. Sometimes she flinched at the faint clang of tools from the engine room. Sometimes her claws clenched until her knuckles went pale. The crew whispered outside her door. "She's dangerous," Jax muttered. "She's broken," said Tali. "She's breathing," the captain replied simply. At night, the screams came. They started soft, muffled through the door, then sharp, tearing out like blades. The captain was the first to reach her room. She was on the floor, shaking violently, eyes wide and unfocused, gasping like she was drowning. Her hands clawed at the sheets, at her own chest. He didn't touch her. He just sat down on the floor near the door, far enough not to be a threat, close enough to be real. "Breathe," he said softly. She didn't seem to hear him, so he talked. Quiet, steady, calm. He told her about the stars they were passing, about how they looked like frozen fire, about a comet he had once followed for 6 days until it vanished behind a red moon, about the way silence could be beautiful if it wasn't empty. Her trembling slowed. Her breaths came slower, softer. Finally, she sagged against the wall, eyes half shut, still trembling but no longer fighting shadows. "You're safe now," he whispered. Her eyes flicked toward him, small and sharp, then closed. She slept. After that night, she kept her distance, but the screaming stopped. She stayed in her room, ate small meals, listened when he spoke, though she never replied. It was not trust. Not yet. But it was the first crack in her wall, and sometimes when the captain passed her doorway, he saw her sitting there in silence, not broken, not defeated, just waiting to remember who she was. The ship floated through silent space, engines purring softly like a heartbeat. Most of the crew slept. Only dim hallway lights glowed, soft and golden, painting long shadows along the walls. She had begun to walk again. Slowly. Carefully. But her steps made no sound. She moved like someone who had forgotten how to be seen. At first, she only walked from her cabin to the mess hall and back. She sat far from everyone, eating in silence while the crew whispered about her. They still feared her, this alien warrior from a fallen clan. Her once glorious armor was gone, her skin marked with half-healed wounds, her eyes always looking down. But the captain saw what the others didn't. She was not proud anymore. She was not angry, she was simply hollow. That night the screams returned. The captain woke to the sound, a sharp, broken cry echoing down the corridor. He was out of bed before his mind caught up, boots silent on the floor as he ran toward her cabin. Her door was open. She was on the floor, curled in a tight ball, claws digging into her arms, eyes wide and wild. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. Her skin glimmered with cold sweat. She didn't see him. She wasn't here. She was somewhere far away, back in fire, in chains, in shame. The captain stopped at the doorway. He didn't touch her. He just sat down slowly on the floor a few feet away. Her eyes darted to him, then past him like he wasn't real. "It's just a dream," he said softly. Her claws scraped the metal floor. Her whole body trembled. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. "You're safe," he whispered. "No one here will hurt you." She shook her head violently, gasping. "Listen to my voice," he said, calm, steady, like anchoring her to this moment. "Not the past. The past can't reach you here." He began to talk quietly, not about her pain, but about the stars. He told her how the ship had passed through a silver nebula last week, how the gas swirled like rivers of light, how some stars live for billions of years and some burned out fast and bright like fireworks. His voice was slow, steady, soft, words drifting like warm wind. Her breathing slowed, her claws unclenched from her arms. Her eyes blinked, still glassy but less wild. "You're here," he said gently. "Not there, here." Her trembling eased. She let out one long, shaky breath like something breaking loose inside her chest. She lowered her head onto the cold floor and closed her eyes. They stayed like that for a long time. Neither moved. Only the hum of the engines filled the silence. Finally, he stood slowly, quietly. He picked up the thin blanket from her bed and laid it gently over her shoulders. She flinched at the touch, but didn't push it away. "Sleep," he whispered. He left the door open as he walked out, boots soft against the floor. The next morning, she came to the mess hall. She didn't sit in the corner this time. She sat at the end of the main table, not looking at anyone but not hiding either. She ate slowly, staring at the steam rising from her soup like it was something fragile. When she finished, she looked up once, just a glance. The captain caught it from across the room. Her eyes were still shadowed, but they were awake. That night, she did not scream. She slept quietly in her room, the door half open, the blanket tucked around her like armor made of cloth, and somewhere in the dark, a tiny spark of something old and buried flickered behind her hollow eyes. Not pride, not trust yet, but life. The ship docked at a forgotten outpost that circled a dying moon. Rusty lights flickered across cracked walls and the corridors smelled of cold metal and old oil. They had come only to trade for fuel. But her past was waiting there. She walked beside the crew for the first time, wrapped in a clean coat, her wounds mostly healed. Her silver hair hung loose around her shoulders now, soft instead of matted. Still, her steps were careful. Her eyes stayed low. She moved like someone walking on a thin rope above darkness. The captain walked ahead, speaking quietly with the station quartermaster. The rest of the crew carried crates behind them. Then voices rose from the market stalls, sharp and cruel, cutting through the cold air. "Well, look who crawled out from the ashes," she froze. Her breath caught like broken glass in her chest. 3 figures stepped from the shadows, armored aliens with red insignias on their shoulders. Old war clan marks, her war clan. Their leader laughed, the sound like cracked bone. "You're still alive? I thought shame would have killed you by now." Her body locked. Her claws twitched. Her eyes stared at the floor. The second warrior sneered. "Did the humans find you crawling like a rat?" She ran from the last battle. The third spat. Abandoned her unit. Left them to burn. The words hit her like knives. She couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The market noise faded to nothing. The captain turned. He saw her, frozen, pale, eyes wide and empty. And he understood. He stepped between her and them, coat shifting in the cold air like a drawn curtain. "She's with me," he said quietly. The leader snorted. "Then you're keeping a coward." "She's not a coward," the captain said. "She fled. She survived." The red-marked warrior's smile twisted. "You should be ashamed to walk with her." "She's alive," the captain said, voice sharp as steel. "That's nothing to be ashamed of." The warrior's laughter faded. His tone had cut through it like a blade. They glanced at each other, suddenly uneasy. The leader spat on the floor. "She is nothing. She is mine," the captain said. "And she walks where I walk." The crew had stopped nearby, silent, watching with wide eyes. The market had gone still around them. Even the wind seemed to pause. The leader's eyes narrowed. "Careful, human. You defend trash." The captain stepped closer, eyes calm but cold as deep space. "She's not trash. She is under my protection. And if you want to test that," his voice lowered until it was almost a growl, "you won't leave this moon." For a moment, no one breathed. Then the leader laughed once, sharp and bitter. "Keep your broken thing," he said. "See if it remembers how to stand." They turned and vanished into the market shadows like ghosts fading into smoke. Silence returned slowly. The crew exhaled, tension bleeding from their shoulders. The captain turned back. She was still standing there. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes stared at nothing. "Hey," he said softly. "It's over." Her eyes lifted to his face. Just for a second. Something unreadable flickered there. Shock, confusion, and a thin crack of warmth. "You don't know what I did," she whispered. "I don't care what you did," he said gently. "You're here now." Her lips trembled. She turned away, hiding her face, and walked back toward the ship in silence. But her shoulders were straighter. And her steps were stronger. That night, as the ship left the dying moon behind, she sat alone in her cabin. Her claws were still trembling, but for the first time when she closed her eyes, she didn't see fire and shame. She saw the human standing in front of her, voice like quiet thunder saying, "She is mine." And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like nothing. The ship moved through a field of quiet stars. The dark glass of space spread like endless ocean. Inside, life had begun to change. Quietly, slowly, gently. She no longer stayed locked in her cabin. She walked the halls now, silent but steady. Her wounds had faded to pale lines. Her steps no longer dragged. She carried herself like someone trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. At first, she only watched the crew from a distance. They worked, they laughed, they argued about small things like broken wiring and burnt coffee. They weren't warriors. They weren't cruel. They weren't afraid of her anymore, just cautious, curious. One morning, she stood outside the engine room, watching the mechanic crawl under a sparking panel. Jax looked up, squinting through the smoke. "You can come in." "You know," he said. She didn't answer, but the next day, she returned holding a small box of tools. She passed him the right wrench without being asked. He blinked in surprise. "Thanks." She said nothing, but her claws stopped trembling. The days settled into small rhythms. She organized scattered tools. She helped wipe oil from the mess hall tables after meals. She fetched parts for the engineer, checked seals on doors, swept away the glittering frost that built up on the outer hatches. No one asked her to. She just did it. The ship no longer felt like a prison. It began to feel like hers too. One evening, the crew gathered in the mess hall. The captain sat near the viewport, silent as always, watching the stars. She sat at the far end of the table, eating slowly, listening to their soft laughter. Then the cleaning bot rolled into the room. It was old, round, and very confused. It spun in circles, beeped once, and bumped straight into the captain's boots. The crew laughed. The captain sighed, and she made a sound, a soft, sharp breath. Almost a laugh. She quickly covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide as if she had broken something. Everyone went still. Then the younger cook grinned. Did you just laugh?" Her ears flushed pale silver. She looked away fast. The captain's lips curved slightly. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just watched as something fragile bloomed quietly across her face. A smile, small, crooked, faint as starlight, but real. After that, everything shifted. She sat a little closer at meals. She spoke small words. Pass, done, careful, while fixing panels with Jax. She even let the younger cook braid a strand of her silver hair one lazy afternoon. She still startled at loud noises. She still woke from dreams sometimes, eyes sharp and wild, but when she walked past the captain on the bridge one night, she paused. He raised an eyebrow. "Need something?" She shook her head, but the faint smile touched her lips again, just for a heartbeat. Then she left. That night, the captain stood at the viewport alone, looking at the streaking stars. Behind him, her quiet laugh from the mess hall still echoed in his memory like soft bells. He had seen her arrive shattered and silent. Now she was slowly stitching herself back together, and for the first time, he let himself believe she might stay. The storm came without warning. One moment, the ship was gliding through calm black space. The next, alarms howled as the hull rattled under invisible fists of charged gas. Lightning danced across the windows like white claws. The engine screamed, fighting the drag of the storm belt. The crew strapped themselves in, shouting over the roar. The captain's voice cut through the chaos like steel. "Hold her steady."
"Shields up!"
She stood frozen in the corridor. The light strobed red around her. The floor shook. Her claws dug into the wall as old terror rose like a wave, cold and sharp, choking her breath. Her vision blurred. The storm became fire. The ship became screaming metal and falling debris. She could hear them again. Her old commanders shouting, her sisters crying, the flames closing in. Her body shook violently. Then, footsteps. The captain appeared at the end of the corridor, coat whipping in the gust of pressurized air. He saw her, stopped. "Come," he said, calm and sure, even as alarms wailed. "This ship won't fall." She shook her head. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Her body trembled like broken glass. He didn't argue. He just walked to her side and held out his hand. Her eyes flicked to it, then to his face. His eyes were steady. Real. Something inside her cracked. She placed her shaking hand in his. He led her through the chaos, step by step, steady as stone. Past the screaming lights, past the roaring hull into the quiet shelter of his quarters. The storm still raged outside, shaking the walls. But here it was dim, warm, safe. She stood by the door, soaked in fear, claws clenched tight. Her breaths came in broken gasps. The captain set his weapon on the table, pulled off his gloves, and sat on the edge of the bed. "You're safe," he said quietly. "The storm can't take us." She didn't move. Then slowly she whispered, "Storms always take everything." "Not this time," he said. His voice was soft but certain. "Not you." Something in her chest ached at those words. She stepped forward like walking through water. Her legs trembled. Her shoulders sagged under an invisible weight. The captain lifted the blanket on the far side of the bed and said nothing more. No command. No comfort, just space. She hesitated, then climbed onto the bed, slow, careful, silent. She stayed on the far side, curled small, not touching him, just close enough to feel his steady warmth through the air. The storm roared outside. Inside, her breath slowly matched the rhythm of his. Her claws loosened. Her eyes closed. And for the first time in years, she fell asleep without fear. When the storm finally passed hours later, the ship floated quiet and still again, bathed in soft silver light from a nearby star. She woke to silence, to safety. The captain was still there, boots on the floor, coat over the chair, watching the morning reports on a small screen. He didn't look at her, didn't speak. He simply let her have this moment like it was hers. She sat up slowly, blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. "Why?" she whispered. He glanced at her. "Because you needed a place to breathe." Her lips trembled. She turned her face away, but he caught it, the faintest flicker of peace in her eyes. That night she returned to her own cabin. But she slept with her door open. Weeks passed. The storm became only a memory, soft, distant, like thunder fading behind the stars, and she was not the same woman anymore. She no longer walked like a shadow. She walked like someone who belonged. Her silver hair was brushed clean now, braided loosely behind her shoulder. Her claws were steady. Her eyes, once empty and cold, glimmered with quiet light. She ate meals with the crew, sitting at the table instead of apart. She spoke small words. Past that. Almost done. Careful. And sometimes even teased Jax about dropping his tools. At night she wandered the halls humming low, soft tones from her homeworld that curled through the ship like warm smoke. The crew stopped whispering about her. They started smiling at her instead. One evening she sat in the mess hall after dinner, wiping down the table with a rag while the others drifted away. The captain passed by, heading to the bridge. "Lights out in an hour," he said quietly. She nodded, and for the first time she smiled without hiding it. It was small, soft, real. The captain blinked, then gave a small nod and walked on. That night she stood at the viewport alone. The stars drifted past like silent silver birds. Her reflection looked back at her from the glass, clean, steady, alive. She thought of the woman who had crawled through fire, who had collapsed on a cold station floor, who had expected to die alone. And she thought of the human who had picked her up anyway. Her chest ached, but not from shame this time. From something else, something warm. Later, she found herself at his doorway. He was reading reports at his desk, boots off, coat folded neatly on the chair. He looked up as she stood there unsure. "Yes?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then said, "Do you still mean it?" "Mean what? That I belong here?" His eyes softened. "You do." Her voice cracked like thin glass. "Why?" He leaned back, studying her like the answer mattered. "Because you stayed," he said. "Because you healed. Because this place is better with you in it." Something in her chest broke open. Tears rose, hot and quiet. She crossed the room silently and sat at the edge of his bed. He didn't speak, didn't move. He only set the datapad aside and sat beside her, close but not touching, like always letting her choose. She leaned her head gently on his shoulder, and this time, she stayed there. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the stars through the small window. No fear, no fire, no chains, just warmth, just peace. In the weeks that followed, her laughter joined the hum of the ship. She walked beside the captain during cargo runs, checked seals with Jax, even told the younger cook stories about her world's blue sun and singing rivers. She had come to them broken, shamed, and alone. Now she walked the halls with steady steps and eyes bright as starlight. The crew no longer called her the stranger. They called her by her name. One quiet night, as the ship glided through deep black space, the captain found her asleep on the couch in the mess hall, wrapped in a blanket. He paused in the doorway, watching her slow breathing. Then he smiled faintly and whispered, "Welcome home." And in her sleep, she shifted slightly, curling deeper into the blanket, a soft smile on her lips because at last, after everything, she had found more than safety. She had found a home. In his ship. In his arms. In his heart.